April 1945. The once mighty capital of the Third Reich has become a city of ghosts. What was once the proud heart of Hitler's empire now lies in ruins, its wide boulevards turned into trenches, its buildings nothing but shattered stone and fire. Every night, the sky burns red. Every morning, the air smells of smoke, dust, and fear. The Red Army is closing in. From the east, from the north, from the south, Soviet artillery pounds Berlin day and night. Civilians hide in basements, clutching what's left of their lives. They whisper prayers no one will answer. The streets echo with the sound of collapsing walls and distant explosions. The once loyal citizens of the Reich no longer believe in victory. The posters promising final victory hang in tatters, fluttering in the wind. But beneath the ground, in a concrete maze 15 meters below the chancellery, another world still exists. A world sealed away from the fire and destruction above. Here, under the earth, Adolf Hitler still rules. Surrounded by a handful of generals, secretaries, and loyal guards, he spends his final days in the Führerbunker. The bunker, built in 1944, is a cold, airless labyrinth of reinforced concrete. Its narrow corridors smell of damp metal and oil. Inside, electric lights flicker, air pumps hum day and night, keeping death at bay. Every few hours, reports arrive from the front, each one worse than the last. The Soviets are only a few kilometers away. The Western Allies have crossed the Rhine. The Reich is surrounded. But even now, deep underground, Hitler refuses to leave. To him, the bunker is not a tomb. It is his fortress. His last stage. He believes, or pretends to believe, that Germany will still rise again. Those around him know the truth. His generals exchange silent looks. His secretaries whisper behind closed doors. Everyone senses that the end is near, yet no one dares to say it aloud. Outside, Berlin continues to die. Tanks roll through the rubble. Children as young as 12 fight with rifles that jam after the first shot. Civilians drag their dead from the streets. In the Tiergarten, trees burn like torches. The world is collapsing, and the bunker is its heart of darkness, a place where time slows down, where the last illusions of a lost empire flicker before fading into nothing. And there, beneath the ruins, the last chapter of the Third Reich begins. Deep beneath the ruined streets of Berlin lies a world frozen in time, a claustrophobic labyrinth of corridors, dim lights, and constant fear. This is the Führerbunker, the nerve center of a dying empire. The walls are 2 meters thick. There are no windows, only concrete, steel doors, and the hum of ventilation fans. The air is stale, heavy with cigarette smoke and the metallic scent of machinery. In this underground fortress, about 30 people live, officers, secretaries, doctors, guards, and Adolf Hitler himself. It is April 1945. Outside, the Red Army has reached the city center. The sounds of artillery shake the walls every few minutes. But down here, life goes on, in slow motion, like a nightmare that no one can wake from. In the main corridor, maps still hang on the walls, lines, arrows, and markers showing armies that no longer exist. Generals still report to Hitler every morning, bringing news of divisions that have already been destroyed. They point to the maps, pretending that there's still a chance to hold the city. Hitler listens, nodding, then erupts in fury, blaming his officers, accusing them of betrayal, of cowardice. His hands tremble. His voice breaks. His generals lower their eyes. None of them dare to argue anymore. Meals in the bunker are simple, canned vegetables, potatoes, bread, and sometimes a bit of pasta. Hitler, a vegetarian, eats little, mostly mashed potatoes and soup. Coffee is a luxury. Champagne bottles still appear during meetings, though no one celebrates anymore. Eva Braun, Hitler's companion, tries to keep a strange sense of normality. She smiles, plays music on an old gramophone, sometimes dances in the narrow hallway with her friends. But even she knows it's the end. The air smells of despair, mixed with perfume and gun oil. At night, people sleep in their uniforms, fully dressed, in case they have to run. Bombs shake the ceiling, dust falls from the walls. Some pray. Others drink. The young guards joke nervously, pretending they aren't afraid. Outside reports tell the truth no one inside wants to hear. The Red Army is only 500 meters away. The Soviets are storming the government district. The Reichstag is under siege. Berlin will fall in days, maybe hours. Still, Hitler refuses to leave. He repeats the same phrase over and over. The war isn't lost, it's only the generals who are lost. His personal doctor injects him with vitamins and stimulants every morning. His hands shake uncontrollably. His eyes look hollow. He barely sleeps. But his mind, once sharp and calculating, now drifts between rage and delusion. Those who live around him feel trapped, not just by the concrete walls, but by history itself. They know they are witnessing the final moments of a regime that once ruled half of Europe. And as the bombs above grow louder, one question haunts everyone in the bunker. How, and when, will it end? April 25, 1945. Berlin is burning. From above, the city looks like a sea of fire, entire districts swallowed by smoke and rubble. Soviet artillery shells fall without pause, turning streets into rivers of dust and twisted metal. Every explosion shakes the ground, echoing through the ruins like thunder. The Red Army has entered the city from all directions. Marshal Zhukov's troops are advancing from the east, while Marshal Konev's forces close in from the south. Between them, a dying capital, defended by boys, old men, and remnants of once proud divisions. On Wilhelmstrasse, the heart of Nazi power, German soldiers dig trenches among the ruins. Teenagers from the Hitler Youth carry Panzerfausts, their faces covered in soot. They fire at Soviet tanks that roll through the smoke, T-34s with red flags painted on their turrets. Every street becomes a battlefield. Every building becomes a fortress. Inside one shattered apartment block, a German sniper waits behind a broken window. His rifle rests on a pile of bricks. He sees movement, a Soviet infantryman darting across the road, and fires. The echo fades instantly beneath the thunder of artillery. Moments later, a tank shell hits the building. The sniper disappears into the dust. Across the city, civilians hide in basements, clutching what little food they have left. The water no longer runs. Electricity is gone. In the darkness, they hear shouting in Russian, gunfire, footsteps. The war is now inside their homes. The Red Army moves street by street, building by building. They blow holes through walls, advancing through apartments instead of open roads. Soviet soldiers mark cleared houses with chalk, Prouveren, checked. For the soldiers, the end feels close, but every meter costs blood. German anti-tank teams ambush them at intersections. Snipers fire from church towers. Even in defeat, the Wehrmacht and SS fight with desperate determination. By April 28, the Soviets have reached the city center. The Reichstag, symbol of German power, stands in ruins, its dome blackened and shattered. Soviet troops prepare for the final assault. Zhukov orders, take the Reichstag. End this war. Inside the Führerbunker, Hitler receives the reports. Soviets are only blocks away. The radio lines are dying one by one. No reinforcements are coming, only silence. Outside, the German capital has become unrecognizable. The Tiergarten Park, once filled with statues and flowers, is now a wasteland of tanks and corpses. Trees lie uprooted. Horses lie dead beside broken carriages. In the canals, the water burns with oil and debris. And yet, through the chaos, one sound dominates all others. The thunder of Soviet artillery, firing round after round, until the city itself seems to shake apart. On April 30th, the red flag rises over the Reichstag. The symbol of victory, and the end of the Reich. In the bunker below, the walls tremble. The final act is about to begin. April 30th, 1945. Morning in Berlin, but the sky above the city is black with smoke. The earth trembles with every distant explosion. Deep beneath the ruins of the Reich Chancellery, in the Führerbunker, the end of an empire unfolds in silence. Adolf Hitler wakes late. His face is pale, his hands tremble. The man who once commanded millions now lives under a few meters of concrete, surrounded by the smell of oil, cigarettes, and damp air. He dresses carefully, gray uniform, iron cross on his chest, pistol at his side, as if preparing for an inspection that will never happen. At 10 a.m., he holds what will be his final staff meeting. Gathered around him are Goebbels, General Krebs, and a handful of officers. The atmosphere is heavy, hopeless. Reports confirm what everyone already knows: Soviet troops are within a few hundred meters. The Chancellery gardens are under fire. The Red Army will reach the bunker entrance within hours. Hitler speaks slowly. His voice is weak, but every word carries the weight of finality. He refuses to surrender. The fight must go on, he says. Those who betray me will pay with their lives. No one answers. They all understand, the war is already lost. By noon, the shelling grows louder. Dust falls from the ceiling with each impact. In the corridors, secretaries whisper. Some cry quietly, others sit motionless, staring at the walls. Eva Braun, now Eva Hitler after their brief wedding the night before, tries to smile. She offers coffee to the staff, pretending nothing is wrong. We must stay brave, she says softly. In the afternoon, Hitler takes a short walk through the narrow bunker corridor. He stops at the map room, his old command center. The maps on the walls are meaningless now, covered in red lines showing Soviet advances from every direction. He studies them for a moment, then turns away. Everything is lost, he murmurs. At 2:30 p.m., he sits down for his last meal, spaghetti with light sauce. He eats little. Then he calls his physician, Dr. Stumpfegger, and orders cyanide capsules to be distributed. He gives one to his dog, Blondie. Moments later, the animal collapses. He wanted to be sure the poison worked. Shortly after 3 p.m., Hitler retreats to his private quarters with Eva Braun. Outside the room, Goebbels and the guard stand in silence. No one speaks. The air feels heavy, electric, the sense that history is about to turn a page. At 3:30 p.m., a sharp sound echoes through the bunker, one gunshot. When the guards enter, they find Hitler slumped on the sofa, a pistol in his right hand, a wound to his temple. Eva lies beside him, lifeless, a faint scent of almonds in the air, cyanide. For a few moments, no one moves. Then, according to Hitler's last orders, the bodies are carried upstairs, through the ruined garden, under heavy Soviet fire. They are placed in a shallow crater, doused with gasoline, and set on fire. Flames rise briefly, flickering in the cold Berlin air, the last fire of the Third Reich. Inside the bunker, no one speaks. The war that began with Hitler's words now ends in silence. By evening, the Red Army is only a few hundred meters away. In the corridors, Goebbels tells the remaining staff, the Führer is dead. The Reich is finished. He smiles weakly, then walks away to meet his own end. Above ground, Berlin burns. Below, the last chapter of the Nazi regime has been written. May 1st, 1945. Berlin has fallen silent, not because the fighting has stopped, but because there is nothing left to destroy. The Red Army moves through the ruins like ghosts among ashes. Soviet soldiers step over collapsed bridges, burned out tanks, and bodies half buried in rubble. The smell of smoke and death hangs over everything. The Reich is gone. In the Führerbunker, the remaining officials know there is no escape. Goebbels, who once promised a 1,000-year Reich, now sits motionless in his office. His wife, Magda, has poisoned their 6 children. A few hours later, the couple commits suicide. Their bodies burn beside the same chancellery walls that once symbolized Nazi power. Above ground, the Soviets take control of Berlin sector by sector. Soldiers raise red banners over government buildings. On May 2nd, a Soviet soldier climbs the shattered dome of the Reichstag and plants the red flag, the symbol of victory over fascism. For millions of people across Europe, this moment marks the end of 6 years of unimaginable horror. But for Berliners, it is the beginning of something else, survival. Civilians emerge from cellars, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. They walk through the wreckage, searching for food, water, or missing relatives. The streets are filled with the sound of sobbing, foreign voices, and the rumble of Soviet trucks. Women hang white sheets from windows, a silent plea for peace. In the days that follow, Soviet officers establish order amid the chaos. Command posts are set up in destroyed buildings. Hospitals reopen in basements. The wounded and dying fill makeshift wards. For many, it's too late, the city has no medicine, no electricity, and barely any food. By May 4th, across northern Germany, other cities surrender. The British and Americans accept the capitulation of German forces in Denmark and the Netherlands. But in the east, the battle rages on. The last remnants of the Wehrmacht still fight in pockets, in Prague, in Courland, and in Austria, refusing to believe that their Führer is dead. On May 7th, at Reims, France, General Alfred Jodl signs the unconditional surrender of all German forces. The document is simple, just a few lines of text, but it ends the deadliest war in human history. At 23:01 on May 8, 1945, the guns of Europe fall silent. In Moscow, fireworks light up the night sky. People dance in the streets. The Soviet Union has lost over 26 million lives, but the nightmare is over. In London, church bells ring for the first time in years. In New York, crowds fill Times Square, waving flags, singing, crying. But in Berlin, the night is quiet. There are no celebrations, only ruins. The victors walk among the defeated, and the weight of history settles over the city like dust. From the ashes of the Reich, a new world begins to form, divided by ideology, scarred by loss, but alive. Germany will be split into 4 occupation zones. Berlin itself will become a divided city, a symbol of both victory and the coming Cold War. For those who survived, there are no clear heroes or villains anymore, only memories, hunger, and the question of how to rebuild a world that had destroyed itself. And so, as dawn breaks over the ruins, Berlin begins again, not with speeches or parades, but with silence. A silence that carries the echo of everything that was lost. May 1945. The guns are silent, but the war is not over. For the victors, a new mission begins, a mission not of battle, but of justice. All across Europe, Allied intelligence units move through the ruins of the Reich, armed not with rifles, but with lists of names. Generals, SS officers, Gestapo agents, Nazi party officials, the men who built the machine that plunged the world into darkness. Some are dead. Many are missing. Others are already on the run. Within days of Berlin's fall, rumors spread, high-ranking Nazis have fled. Some are said to be hiding in the Bavarian Alps, the mythical Alpine fortress where the last resistance was supposed to stand. American troops rush to the south, seizing castles, bunkers, and secret tunnels. They find supplies, weapons, gold, but no fortress, and no organized defense. The Reich has crumbled too completely for that. Still, the hunt intensifies. In Flensburg, near the Danish border, British forces capture Admiral Karl Donitz, Hitler's chosen successor, who tried to form a provisional government. He surrenders quietly, knowing it's over. Soon after, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, is caught by British patrols near Bremervord. He tries to disguise himself as a common soldier, but when identified, he bites down on a hidden cyanide capsule. Justice is denied by his own hand. Others are not so lucky. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, General Alfred Jodl, Joachim von Ribbentrop, one by one, they are found and taken into custody. But some escape the net. In Italy, SS officers slip across the mountains with the help of sympathizers. In Austria, priests and smugglers create what will become known as the Ratlins, secret routes leading to Spain, and from there to South America. Argentina, Chile, Brazil, soon these names become whispered destinations among fugitives of the fallen Reich. Meanwhile, Allied intelligence begins the monumental task of sorting through millions of captured documents. Every memo, order, and telegram is examined. The goal is clear: to identify those responsible for war crimes, from concentration camps to massacres across occupied Europe. By late summer 1945, thousands of former Nazis are in custody. But the real challenge lies ahead: how to bring justice to crimes of such scale, so vast and inhuman that ordinary law seems powerless before them. In London, Washington, Moscow, and Paris, the Allies agree, there must be a trial. Not just revenge, but a reckoning. The world must see the truth, in court, under oath, with evidence undeniable. And so, preparations begin for what will become the Nuremberg trials, the first international tribunal in history. Judges and lawyers are chosen. Translators, clerks, witnesses. The world's attention turns to one city, a place once synonymous with Nazi power, now to become the stage of its judgment. But even as justice begins, others vanish into the shadows. Some escape with forged papers, others with the help of silent allies in neutral countries. For years to come, the hunt will continue, across oceans, continents, and decades. Because though the war has ended, its ghosts have not. November 20th, 1945. The war is over, but the world is not at peace. In the heart of ruined Germany, in the city of Nuremberg, once the proud stage of Nazi rallies, justice takes its place on the same ground where tyranny once stood. Inside the Palace of Justice, 21 men sit in the dock. Once they were untouchable, ministers, generals, ideologues, architects of a regime that enslaved continents and murdered millions. Now they are prisoners, surrounded by Allied guards, beneath the cold gaze of history. The courtroom is built like a fortress. Four flags hang behind the judges: the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, symbols of a fragile alliance that defeated the Reich. Each nation has sent its own prosecutors, its own interpretation of justice. But the message is united. For the first time in human history, leaders will be judged for crimes against humanity. The chief prosecutor for the United States, Justice Robert H. Jackson, stands before the tribunal. His voice is calm, deliberate, but unshakable. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish, he says, have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated. The room falls silent. The era of impunity is over. Each day, evidence is presented, thousands of documents, orders, and testimonies. Footage from liberated concentration camps is shown on large screens. For many in the courtroom, it is the first time they see the true face of Nazi terror. The images are unbearable: mass graves, emaciated survivors, piles of shoes, hair, and ashes. Even the accused turn away. Hermann Göring, once the proud commander of the Luftwaffe, tries to dominate the proceedings. He mocks witnesses, argues with the judges, and insists that everything was done for the protection of Germany. But as the trial continues, the arrogance fades. The evidence is overwhelming. Ribbentrop, the foreign minister, stares blankly as his signature is read on treaties that led to invasion after invasion. Keitel listens in silence as reports describe massacres ordered under his command. Hans Frank, the butcher of Poland, writes in his diary that he prays for forgiveness. The defense tries to argue obedience, that they were merely following orders. But the tribunal rejects this forever. Obedience to unlawful orders does not absolve guilt. Outside the courthouse, the world listens. Newspapers in London, Moscow, New York, and Paris print daily updates. For the survivors of the camps, for millions who lost everything, the words justice and truth finally begin to mean something again. By October 1, 1946, the verdicts are read. 12 men are sentenced to death by hanging, including Göring, Ribbentrop, and Keitel. 3 receive life imprisonment. Others are given long sentences. 3 are acquitted, proof that this is not revenge, but law. The night before his execution, Göring cheats the gallows with cyanide. The rest meet their fate at dawn. The hangman's noose closes the chapter that began with the rise of the Reich. When it is over, the courtroom empties. The world has witnessed something unprecedented, a trial not of nations, but of morality itself. The principles born in Nuremberg will echo through the decades. No one is above the law. No atrocity is beyond judgment. And though the ashes of war still darken Europe, a fragile hope emerges, that humanity, for all its failures, can still hold itself accountable. Germany lies in ruins. Cities reduced to ash, the Reich broken, its leaders dead or captured. But not all of them. In the shadows of defeat, another war begins, the war to disappear. In the chaos of post-war Europe, thousands of Nazi officers, SS members, and collaborators vanish like ghosts. They shed their uniforms, burn documents, and trade their names for new identities. And soon, whispers spread, about Ratlins, secret escape routes that lead from Germany to freedom. The trail begins in the ruins of Bavaria and Austria. Under false papers, fugitives blend among millions of displaced persons. Some hide in monasteries, others pretend to be refugees fleeing communism. The Red Cross, overwhelmed by millions of requests, unknowingly issues travel documents to war criminals under fake names. A new identity costs only a few signatures, and silence. One of the main hubs lies in the Austrian town of Innsbruck, where sympathetic clergy and former SS networks work together to smuggle fugitives south. Their destination, Italy. From there, through the Vatican's shadowy humanitarian channels, they find passage to new worlds, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and even the Middle East. Among the first to vanish is Adolf Eichmann, the bureaucrat who orchestrated the deportation of millions to death camps. In 1950, using the name Ricardo Clement, he boards a ship from Genoa to Buenos Aires. There, in a quiet suburb, he lives as a factory worker, blending into ordinary life. For years, he disappears from the world's attention, until the Mossad finds him in 1960. Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, from Auschwitz, also escapes. Through monasteries in Bavaria and secret help from former comrades, he reaches South America. He lives in Paraguay, then Brazil, always under false names. He becomes a ghost, always one step ahead of capture, until his death in 1979, drowned while swimming, his true identity discovered only years later. Even more shocking are the high-ranking officers who escape justice with quiet assistance. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, works for U.S. intelligence for years, because his knowledge of Soviet networks is too valuable during the Cold War. Later, with help from American and Catholic contacts, he flees to Bolivia, where he becomes an advisor to the regime. Only in 1983 is he finally extradited to France and sentenced to life imprisonment. But not all who escape are captured. Many melt into the societies of South America, building new lives, founding German-speaking colonies in remote jungles, raising families, and watching the decades pass as if their crimes belonged to another world. In Argentina, President Juan Perón secretly welcomes them. He sees them not as criminals, but as skilled engineers, officers, and scientists who can help rebuild his country. Ships arrive from Europe carrying men with clean papers, new names, and heavy secrets. The port of Buenos Aires becomes the final stop of a long, dark pilgrimage. Meanwhile, a new kind of soldier rises, the Nazi hunters. Men like Simon Wiesenthal, a survivor who dedicates his life to tracking fugitives. Armed with archives, photographs, and endless determination, he travels across continents, searching for justice long after the world has moved on. He becomes a living reminder that the past never truly dies. The post-war world prefers to forget, to rebuild, to move forward. But in the quiet corners of South America, in the hidden archives of Rome, in the coded letters of the Red Cross, the truth lingers. That justice was not always complete, and that many of the architects of terror escaped into the sunlight. As the years turn to decades, the Ratlins become legend, a network of complicity that stretched from the ashes of Berlin to the jungles of Brazil. Historians uncover fragments of this web, smugglers, priests, diplomats, and spies, all part of an operation that saved thousands who should have faced judgment. Even today, the full extent of the escape remains shrouded in mystery. How many were helped? Who knew? And how far did the silence reach? One truth remains. The war ended in 1945, but justice did not. When the guns of World War II finally fell silent, a new kind of war began, one fought not with tanks or bombers, but with minds. The United States and the Soviet Union, once uneasy allies, now stared at each other across a divided Europe. The prize was no longer territory, it was knowledge. In the ruins of Germany lay the remains of a scientific empire unlike any other. Nazi laboratories, secret test sites, and underground factories had produced weapons years ahead of their time, jet aircraft, ballistic missiles, nerve agents, and even early rocket technology capable of reaching space. And the men behind these projects, scientists, engineers, doctors, suddenly became the most valuable resource on Earth. In May 1945, as American troops advanced through Germany, they stumbled upon one of the most astonishing finds of the war, the V-2 rocket facilities at Peenemünde and Nordhausen. There they discovered towering rocket parts, blueprints, and laboratories filled with instruments. Among the wreckage, one name stood out, Wernher von Braun, the brilliant but controversial rocket engineer whose creations had rained destruction on London. The Americans realized that if they didn't take him, the Soviets would. So began Operation Paperclip, a secret U.S. intelligence program designed to recruit German scientists, many of them former Nazis, and bring them to America. Its goal was simple: secure technology that could give the United States an edge in the coming Cold War. At first, even within Washington, the idea was controversial. How could the nation that had fought against Nazi tyranny now invite its architects of destruction into its laboratories? But the logic of the New World Order prevailed, ideology mattered less than expertise. Rocketry, jet propulsion, chemical weapons, the race for supremacy had already begun. Wernher von Braun and over 1,600 scientists, engineers, and technicians were quietly smuggled into the U.S. between 1945 and 1959. Their Nazi pasts were scrubbed from records. The U.S. Army and intelligence agencies forged new identities, removing evidence of party membership or SS service. For many, a single paperclip on a file indicated that the documents had been sanitized, hence the operation's name. The scientists were settled in places like Fort Bliss, Texas, and later at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. There, under heavy guard, they began testing captured V-2 rockets, launching them into the American desert sky. To the public, they were foreign experts. To those who knew the truth, they were ghosts of a darker age, now serving a new master. Von Braun quickly rose to prominence. His charisma and genius made him indispensable. By the 1950s, he was leading America's missile development programs. And in 1969, when the Saturn V rocket carried Neil Armstrong to the moon, it was von Braun's design that made it possible. The same technology that had once bombarded London now lifted humanity beyond Earth. But behind the triumphs of science lay a moral shadow. Many of these men had worked in concentration camps like Mittelbadora, where thousands of prisoners died building the V-2 rockets under brutal conditions. Historians estimate that for every rocket launched, 10 forced laborers perished. The U.S. government knew, and chose to look away. In classified memos, officials justified the decision with cold logic. If we do not use them, the Russians will. And indeed, the Soviets ran their own parallel program, capturing entire teams of German engineers and relocating them to facilities near Moscow. The space race was born not from pure discovery, but from the ashes of moral compromise. As the years passed, the truth of Operation Paperclip remained hidden from the public. It wasn't until the 1980s that journalists and declassified documents revealed the full extent of the operation, and the chilling realization that many of those who had once served a murderous regime had lived comfortable lives in the United States, shaping its most celebrated achievements. The story of Operation Paperclip forces a haunting question. Can progress be separated from its origins? Can the future ever be clean when it's built by the architects of horror? Von Braun himself once said, "The rocket worked perfectly, except for landing on the wrong planet." It was a line meant as a joke. But history remembers it as something darker, a reminder that in the pursuit of power, the line between genius and guilt can vanish as easily as ink under a paperclip. The year was 1945. The guns had fallen silent, the flags of surrender had been raised, and the world breathed, for the first time in 6 long years. But beneath the surface of celebration, a new kind of conflict began to smolder. World War II was over, yet its shadows were just beginning to stretch across the world. In the ruins of Berlin, Moscow, and Washington, men in suits replaced men in uniforms. The battlefield shifted from cities to conference rooms, from trenches to intelligence offices. The weapons were no longer bullets, but secrets. And as the Allies carved up Germany, the foundations of the next great confrontation, the Cold War, were already being laid. Files captured from Nazi intelligence became the seeds of new spy networks. Former SS officers were recruited by both East and West. Some became double agents. Others built entire intelligence infrastructures for their new masters. Operation Paperclip in the United States had already proven that morality could be set aside for strategy, and the Soviets learned fast. In the 1950s, the American CIA and Soviet KGB began their global chess match. The stakes, influence, ideology, and survival. Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, all became new battlefields for an invisible war. And while politicians spoke of peace, the machinery of espionage, propaganda, and proxy wars spun faster than ever before. Meanwhile, in the quiet villages of South America, another war was still being fought, the hunt for Nazis. After the Reich's collapse, hundreds of high-ranking officers and collaborators fled through secret escape routes known as ratlins, many assisted by sympathetic priests and neutral governments. Argentina, Chile, and Brazil became safe havens. Men like Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, lived under false names, blending into ordinary life, until Israeli agents tracked them down decades later. Eichmann's capture in Buenos Aires in 1960 was not just justice, it was a message to the world. The war may be over, but its crimes will never disappear. But even in Europe, the war's ghosts refused to rest. NATO and the Warsaw Pact began stockpiling nuclear weapons on soil still scarred by the last conflict. Cities rebuilt on ashes became potential ground zero for annihilation. Every technological triumph, from rockets to nuclear power, carried within it the DNA of the war that had come before. The V-2 rocket evolved into the missile that could end civilization. And as old soldiers aged, their memories became weapons of a different kind. Books, films, and propaganda reshaped history, turning victors into heroes and villains into cautionary tales. Yet beneath the patriotic myths lay the same unanswered questions. Was the war truly won, or merely transformed? Even the borders drawn after 1945 continued to bleed. Conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East were all, in one way or another, echoes of that same world war. The ideologies that fueled it, fascism, communism, nationalism, never died. They simply changed their flags. Historians today agree that World War II never truly ended, it just evolved. Its survivors carried it in their minds, its politics shaped the century that followed, and its technologies still define modern warfare. Every intelligence agency, every superpower rivalry, every secret base or satellite, all trace their origins to 1945. And perhaps the most haunting truth of all is this. For all its horror, the war united humanity in its greatest contradiction. It revealed both the darkest and most brilliant aspects of what humans can do, the ability to destroy, and the capacity to rebuild. To end one world, and begin another. In a declassified U.S. memo from 1946, a general wrote, "The next war will not begin, it will simply continue where the last one stopped." More than 70 years later, that prediction still feels disturbingly true. The weapons are faster, the borders different, but the echoes remain, in strategy rooms, in propaganda, in the skies filled with drones instead of bombers. The world we live in today is not post-war. It is the aftershock of a war that never truly ended. So when you watch the old footage, the victory parades, the cheering crowds, remember this. Behind every smile was a secret, behind every peace treaty, a hidden war. And every generation since has been living not in the shadow of World War II, but inside its unfinished story.